Hello, my name is Tom Palmer and I'm a children's author, and I write books like these. I write a lot of sports stories, also I did these books as well. And I like to write stories that are related to sport, and in particular Russia. This, obviously, it's the World Cup in Russia is coming up, and I was very lucky a couple of years ago. I got to go to Moscow in Russia, including to the Luzhniki Stadium where the World Cup final is going to be held, to research this book. This is a thriller. It's about a boy called Danny and his friend Charlotte, and they have to try and stop England footballers being kidnapped during a Russian football tournament set in Moscow. So it's kind of a thriller with a football background. Anyway, when I went to Moscow, I was really excited because I'm really fond of Russia. My favourite ever book that I've ever read is called Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and he's a writer that I really admire, and that's partly why I wanted to go to Russia. But also I was really interested in the architecture and seeing the city, and I'm going to show you in a minute some pictures of the research that I did for the book. But I went to see things like, this is what sort of a model of what a Russian church might look like that I brought back with me. I also brought back with me this. So you might be familiar, you probably are, with Russian dolls, the dolls that you open up and make a terrible noise, and there's dolls inside them. And this is a Russian doll of Russian writers. So I really admire Russian writers like Pushkin, who is a famous Russian writer, Tolstoy, who wrote a book called War and Peace, which you might have heard of. This is Chekhov, who was a famous Russian playwright. I'm afraid I don't know who this one is, but if you can read Russian, I believe in Cyrillic, which is the Russian language, it says his name. It says his name there. But last but not least is Dostoevsky, who is my favourite writer, who wrote this book, Crime and Punishment. Anyway, when I was researching Dead Ball, the thriller set in Moscow, I wanted to know what Moscow was like. I wanted to see what it was like. So I went there, and I took some photos and made some notes, and that helped me make sure my book was realistic, to make you, the reader, feel like you are in Moscow when you're reading the story. So I thought I'd share with you a few of my photos for the trip from when I was writing Dead Ball, and I'm just going to do it by training my camera on my computer, which is a bit primitive, but that's me, I suppose. So this is Red Square, the famous square in Russia, where there's on one side there's the Kremlin and the other there's St. Basil's Cathedral in the corner. This is a back street in Russia. So in the story, in the book, I had Danny running up and down these streets being chased and trying to save the England footballers who'd been kidnapped. This is the place where I bought my Russian dolls. So this is where I bought all these, and you can get different ones, so you can see there's lots of different ones like politicians and film stars, and just the regular Russian doll as well. In Russia, there's quite a lot of interesting vehicles, and this one in particular, I thought it looked quite military. But actually, a lot of rich people or well-off people in Moscow have their own private armies and their own armoured vehicles, because some of them are quite rich and they fear that criminals may try to attack or kidnap them. So they often have vehicles like that. And in fact, in the middle of there's a middle lane in big Russian roads where only vehicles like this and sort of posh black cars can go. So it's quite an interesting place, really. But as well as dangerous things like that in Moscow, like in any city, there are playgrounds for children. And the Russians love their children, and this is one of the playgrounds that I took. There were children there, but I took it without any children in it because I didn't know how to ask them for permission to photograph their children, so I didn't, because I go to speak Russian, sadly. This is a statue I found of Dostoevsky, my favourite writer again. It was so exciting for me to go to a place to see statues of the writers that I really look up to and admire. And here he is, Dostoevsky, writer of Crime and Punishment. You see quite a lot of soldiers on the streets in Moscow, but then again you do in London and Paris and anywhere else you visit. This is the spectacular, wonderful St. Basil's Cathedral, and part of this story is set. Danny actually gets trapped in St Basil's Cathedral overnight, and has to find a way out. And I just thought that was such a stunning building. It's so unlike the cathedrals we have in this country, and it's just beautiful. So I enjoyed going there. This is Lenin's tomb. So Lenin was the leader of the Russian Revolution around 1918, and this is where this is his mausoleum, which is like a tomb, and his body is actually still in there. And there's a bit in the book which is quite gory about when Danny actually goes to, because you can go and see his body, and Danny actually goes to do that. And this is me outside the Luzhniki Stadium. So when you watch the World Cup final on is it the 15th or 16th of July, that's where it will be played. And I went there, and they were very kind. The Russian people were so kind to me, and they gave me a tour of the stadium. So I got to go down the tunnel in the Luzhniki Stadium where the likes of maybe Messi or Ronaldo or even Harry Kane might be walking down for the cup final, the World Cup final. This is the stadium, the beautiful Luzhniki Stadium. And finally, this when I went for my tea after that tour, I had some chips and I had some Russian tomato ketchup. Anyway, so thank you for listening to this video. So this book's called Dead Ball, if you're interested in it, and I suppose it's aimed at 9+. It's kind of a crime thriller set in Moscow, if you'd like to check it out. And you can get it, obviously you can get it from your library, maybe your school library, or bookshops. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye, and enjoy the World Cup.